My name's Sejal Parikh, and in about 2 weeks, I'm going to be the executive director of Working Washington. I'm going to spend a minute telling you what Working Washington is because you might not have heard the name, but I bet you've heard of some of the work that we've done. So, Working Washington launched about 4 years ago from SEIU's Fight for a Fair Economy campaigns nationwide. Ran an Amazon campaign that ended in warehouse workers getting actual air conditioning units built into their warehouses. Amazon dropped out of ALEC, and we currently run 2 campaigns that I'm guessing you've heard of. One is down at the airport in SeaTac, where workers won $15 an hour in November of 2013, and the other is in Seattle with fast food and other low-wage workers, where workers won $15 an hour last year. Yeah. We're pretty proud of that work, but I would caution all the applause. I don't think that we quite have a win yet because these workers aren't organized into anything. These fast food workers aren't quite organized into anything yet, especially in Seattle. And I'll talk about that in a second. But what I really want to talk about is the Seattle 15 campaign and how we got from a place where within a year of the first fast food strike, I think a year and a week, the city council unanimously passed a $15 an hour minimum wage. It's a really fast campaign. And there are a few things that happened really quickly. So one, in Seattle in 2013, we had something like 8 or 9 people running for mayor. We started off in a place where none of them would commit to a $15 an hour minimum wage or raising the minimum wage at all. In the span of 3 or 4 months, the 2 front runners committed to $15 an hour. The first one, who was our current mayor, said, yes, I support $15 an hour. And the next one, who was our outgoing mayor, who was our mayor at the time, said, 15 is the baseline, I would consider something higher, right? So in the span of 3 months, we got from this place where we weren't gonna get anything to where we were gonna get something. We got to a place where our first fast food strikes, we had a number of coalition partners who came out to support the work that fast food workers were doing, to a place within a year where we were holding joint actions with something like 3 dozen community organizations and labor organizations with 100 community partners signed on to a letter supporting $15 an hour, and where almost 75% of Seattle voters said, yes, I support a $15 an hour minimum wage, all within the span of a year. And so I think there's 3 major components to how we did it. One, we were militant and chaotic. And someone gave me the task of making sure that the fast food campaign was militant and chaotic. They said, just go make it militant and go make it chaotic, right? I don't quite know how someone gets that task and makes it happen, but it happened naturally, which I'm gonna talk about in a little bit. 2, we built these non-traditional relationships with labor and community organizations that we're expanding on, that I'll talk about in the next section as well. And 3, I think it might be a little bit controversial, but we, every organization that was a part of this put their ego aside, didn't necessarily want to take credit for it, and we actually did this thing. I used to be a lawyer, and so jurisdiction to me means something really different than what it means in the union world, but we actually, those lines are a little loose. I just got off the phone with a woman from Rock, and I was like, so can we just talk about how we're going to work on these things together? So I think putting the ego and the credit aside was a really big thing. And so I want to talk about a few different things that we did in coalition with community and labor partners, not all perfect, but a way that we got to winning $15 an hour in Seattle. So one, we held a mayoral town hall where these 8 candidates came in. That town hall was not anchored by any union labor president. It wasn't anchored by a community organization. It was actually anchored and hosted by low-wage workers. So those low-wage workers identified themselves maybe by their union, but by their job and by sort of what that job meant to them. It was hosted by probably a dozen community and labor organizations, with every one of them taking a piece of credit, but really the anchor of that was worker forward, no particular organization taking credit for what those workers were doing and who those workers were. 2, we held joint teletown halls and phone banking conversations where, get this, we actually shared lists with each other. We shared, unions would share lists with us, community organizations would share lists amongst themselves, and no one necessarily, there were a couple things, but no one necessarily thought that someone was gonna steal their membership if we were phone banking together. And the third big thing that we did is we sat down and, yes, even in Seattle, there were some labor fights over, struggles and the conversations that we're having right now about, how do we rebuild the labor movement? Is it by rebuilding unions? Is it by doing something different? I sat on this field coalition and we all decided that there were actions that we were gonna take where people were not gonna wear their union t-shirts or their community organization t-shirts, and we were gonna carry black and white signs and just be people together. And there were ones that we were going to do under the umbrella of Working Washington, which has an advantage of not necessarily being a labor union, although we, up until this year, have been largely SEIU funded. So I'll pause.